Welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. This week in the clubhouse, we were delighted to welcome writer Nadja Lubiw-Hazard, a wonderful person who taught us so much in one short hour about the importance of finding out what you value, the fact that how we live our days is how we live our lives, and the value of persistence, among many other things. Hope you enjoy. Hey, James. We have a gifted achiever in the clubhouse, Nadja. Yeah. I'm excited. I just read her book last night. Twice.
I am too, because I showed up completely unprepared to talk to Diana.
Well, that's because we're the gifted underachievers.
Right.
I mean, I shouldn't be prepared either if we're going to be on brand.
Yeah.
First, to introduce Nadja, I'm just going to read her bio because it says it all. Welcome to Nadja Lubiw-Hazard. Did I say that right?
You got it. Perfect.
Thanks, Nadja. Nadja is a Toronto-based writer. She previously worked as a veterinarian, most recently at the Toronto Humane Society. For those who are in other countries, Toronto is a big city in Canada. Nadja is the author of the novel The Napaway Motel and the children's book Tizzy and Me, 15 Ways to Love a Mink. Her second Tizzy and Me story will be published in the fall, and her short story collection, The Life of a Creature, will be released next spring. A lifelong animal lover and longtime advocate for them, Nadja's writing often explores themes related to the more than human world. I love the way you put that, more than human. Nadja is a trained creative writing workshop facilitator and has worked with Firefly Creative Writing, the Writers Collective of Canada, Workman Arts, and CAMH Collaborative Learning College. Her Collaborative Learning College workshops focus on pet loss grief, eco-grief, and the grief of mental illness. She lives with her wife, her 2 adult daughters, and a feisty, fluffy cat. She enjoys yoga, vegan cooking, collage making, and spending time in nature.
There you go. That sounds it.
Love it. Love it.
Thank you so much for being here, Nadja. You know, reading your bio, I just want to move in with you guys. It just sounds so great. So really glad to have you here.
Oh, I'm super excited to be here, and I've been listening to some of your past episodes, and they're so fun and interesting. So I hope that I can live up to the other guests you've had.
Oh God!
Oh, you just did. So you're all good.
Exactly. So I just let's start with Tizzy and Me because it came out. Was it last year, 2024?
Yeah, November 2024.
Quite late 2024. So it's really less than 6 months out in the world.
Yep.
And I keep forgetting we're audio. I'm holding it up to the camera. It's a great chapter book, really delightful. You know what? There's a few things I liked about it. Well, we'll talk about the illustrations and how those came around. You know how that works, really, because I'm not familiar with how that works. But that I just want to say that I read a lot of children's books because I have children, and they're not children anymore. But in the day, that was our thing that we do before bed for quite a long time, and sometimes at other times of the day. And what I really liked about Tizzy and Me, the first book, is that it's got a really strong arc. You know, the story it's cohesive and it builds and then it kind of turns in the middle. I don't want to give too much away for those who haven't read it yet, but I think what I loved was there's elements so Tizzy is the dog.
Yes.
And there's elements in the human protagonist that are kind of, you know, she's unpredictable, she's super curious, and she has that quality that kids can have where you hear something and you go, well, that's the information my friends need to have too. Everybody needs to know this. And then you accidentally sort of hurt your friends' feelings or bring them information that, you know, makes their life more complicated. And then you got to deal with the fallout. So there was that aspect to it. Pippi Longstocking, I think, is mentioned in the first page. And when I reread the Pippi books to my kids, because I'd read them as a kid and thought Pippi was amazing.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and, then I reread them to my kids and like, Pippi's a sociopath. I mean, there's almost she is a I the difference I liked about your book and the Pippi books was that there's no sociopathy in how your, God, because it's first person, I forget the little girl's name.
Georgia.
Georgia!
George is our little feisty protagonist for this
Yeah,
story.
she's
Yeah.
it because she's really, she's doing something that matters in the end, and I don't wanna say how it gets there, but it go whereas Pippi, I don't think she was just chaotic, I don't
She
remember her.
was chaotic, but I loved her because of that, I think, the way she slept with her feet on the pillow and, she
Yeah.
was so strong, she could lift her horse up and, made chaos in the kitchen making pancakes. I mean, I think she was the exact opposite of who I was, so maybe that's why I admired her so much.
Yeah, yeah, and I really loved her didn't she come across a big cache of gold coins or something?
Oh, yeah, there's all sorts of things like that.
She had all kinds of power that kids don't normally have. She lived
Yeah, I mean,
alone.
she lived alone, right?
Yeah, yeah, so, yeah, it was it is different, and because part of it is that the adults in this book, um, are they come in at perfect points with, just enough information to help Georgia figures stuff out onto the next step, and then the next step, and the next step after that. So that's what I think every parent would aspire to is to be that kind of adult where you just come in and give them enough help that they can learn something.
Yeah. Yeah. I really wanted the story to be child centered. So really it's Georgia and her best friend Winona. They
Yeah,
have conflict, but they also work together and they do amazing things together. And I think
yeah,
it's very empowering for kids to hear and read stories that really are centered with their life at the
yeah,
forefront.
yeah, yeah. True. And so had you had Georgia in your mind for a while before you started writing? How did this book come to be?
Oh, it's got a long, long story. So wrote my very first Tizzy and Me story many, many years ago. I'm going to say more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I wrote my first Tizzy and Me story and I sent it out and I got some good feedback, but I didn't get a yes to getting it published. I wrote a second Tizzy and Me story. I sent that one out. I also got good feedback. There was one publisher that said, "Oh, I love this story," and I would have said yes, except I just signed another chapter book that
Mm,
has two mums in it, so it doesn't fit with our, publishing sort of program right now. And then I wrote this one. This was the third one that I wrote,
yeah.
and it was triggered a little bit by the pandemic because one of the themes of the story is mink fur farming, and that was
Mhm.
really in the forefront, especially for me because I follow a lot of animal-related news and animal issues. And mink fur farming was a real problem with COVID, and so there were fur farms that had to be culled, which means they're killing all the animals.
Mm,
And there were countries that completely banned mink fur farming, especially in Europe. And so, because I'm such an animal lover and such an advocate for them, this particular issue was really grabbing a hold of me because it seems very winnable.
mm,
The demand for fur is going down, the number of fur farms is going down, and they're just a disaster. They're terrible for the animals, for these wild animals being held in this terrible conditions of captivity. Terrible for people because of the risk of COVID, for example. Terrible for the environment because of the environmental pollution, especially into the water. And
mm,
so it was an issue that I thought, oh, I'm going to take this on from a child's point of view and see, because I already knew George and Winona from my other two stories. So I
yeah,
think that helped a lot that I'd already written these two characters into life. So that was
yeah.
easy to bring them into the story. The other thing that I did with this book was that I worked with a mentor, Robin Stevenson. She's a Canadian author. She writes a lot of children's and young adult books. And I'm part of the Writers Collective of Canada, and they have a mentorship program. It's just like a mini grant
Mhm.
to work with a mentor for like 10 hours. But Robin's feedback was so amazing and so helpful. And it really tightened the story up before I sent it out.
Yeah.
And so that's how it came into being. It's been published with Red Deer Press, and Bev Brenna is the publisher there, and she's amazing.
That's so great. And so did you submit to more than one small press?
I think I did. I'm trying to remember now. When I do submissions, I usually do them in triplets. I don't know. That just seems to appeal to me. It's like I send it out to 3 places and I'm like, one of them's going to say yes. But I've dealt with tons of rejection, tons and tons and tons of rejection. I've sent out so many things that rejection doesn't really faze me at all anymore. But anyways, Brenna said yes. And I had sent her, I think 2 or 3 other manuscripts in this sort of maybe the 6 months or the year before that. And she was so generous with her response. It wasn't just like, this doesn't fit with our publishing mandate right now or whatever, or like the story was great, but we can't publish it. She gave really specific feedback, which was wonderful, and especially in this day and age where some places are like, if you don't hear back from us in 6 months, it's a no, which I think is so, unnecessary. Just to send a quick email reply, no, thank you, didn't work for us. Anyway, so it was the exact opposite experience.
You have a big red button, right? You're going through your slush pile and you have a big red button, just, no, and it automatically sends an email or something.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea.
I know. It's frustrating and a little crazy making. And then randomly, the person who on their website in big flashing red letters says, if you don't hear from us in 6 weeks or whatever, we're not interested. And then 8 months later, you hear from them saying, oh, we're interested.
Yeah, I had that actually with the short story collection. I had sent it out. And I waited a long time to hear back from quite a few publishers. And then Arsenal Pulp responded and they wanted me to add a few more stories. They thought it was a little bit short. And then I heard from a publisher that I had submitted, I'm going to say a year ago, with this, like, oh, I'm really interested in this. I was like, why now? Why 2 publishers at the same time? That never happened to me before. So anyways.
What did you do?
I submitted the manuscript, but I let the publisher know that it was under consideration somewhere else, but I hadn't signed a contract. They hadn't said yes. I hadn't said yes. So, I went through with both of them considering it. And then I chose Arsenal Pulp Press.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
I have a fun, connection with Arsenal because, they're Vancouver based and also they publish the international, or they did in the 80s published the international 3-day novel, the writing contest.
That sounds amazing. What is the 3-day novel? Tell me more about that.
Oh, well, it's this annual event every Labor Day weekend. You have from just past midnight Friday, so 12:01 Saturday to 11:59 p.m. Monday to write a novel. And
writing a novel in 3 months, which is what I did with Napaway. I thought that was fast.
That is fast.
It happens in September. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try.
Yay! I'm always trying to recruit. Yay! Anyway, so where were we? Gosh, I got off on this tangent because we were talking about Arsenal.
Oh yes, that's where we were.
Yeah.
And deciding to go with them as your publisher. And so, it's interesting that you've got this mix of, you've got a novel, you've now got, I don't think is it a children's book is maybe the exact correct.
It's a children's chapter book, but the bigger category is just children's books. Yeah.
And then now you've got a collection of short stories coming out, and the collection, it is based on short stories that you've published out and about. Is there
So my sort of path to becoming a writer, I'm going to say maybe 15 years ago, something like that. I was doing sort of I was in my 40s and I was like, I'm doing that midlife crisis kind of thing. Like, what do I still want to do? And, what have I done? And am I happy? And I took part in this workshop called the Dream Path Workshop. And one of the things that came out of that, we did guided meditations and visualizations and talked about our daydreams and our night dreams. And one of the things that came out of that was how much I wanted to write a novel and get it published. And I had already written a novel sort of just secretly at home when my kids were little. Like, I wasn't part of any writing community, wasn't part of any writing group. I wasn't even really thinking about getting it published. I was just like, this novel just kind of came out of me. And it was so much fun to write it. And I just loved being in that creative space. So I kind of found a new version of myself. Anyway, so pop over to a few years later and I was like, I want to take my writing more seriously. So I signed up for some writing classes. And from there, I ended up being part of a writing group. And I started writing a novel, and I thought, well, as far as I understand, if you want to get something published, you need to have a bit of like publishing experience. So I thought, oh, what I need to do is write short stories. Not even that I was so interested in short stories or that I had skill in writing short stories. I just was like, okay, this is the next step. I kind of just like got on this train and I was like, I'm going here. So I started writing short stories and I started submitting them, and I got lots of rejections. And then finally I got like one story published and I was thrilled. And then I kept writing and I got another story published, all in it, like these small Canadian literary magazines, but there are lots of them. And there's some amazing work being published. And there's some amazing editors out there who, really support emerging writers. So, over time, I've ended up with like maybe 8 published short stories, and I'd written 12, and that's when I sent the collection out. But I was also really encouraged because I'd been applying for grants, and I got a grant from the Ontario Arts Council for the short story collection, which really sort of bolstered my confidence around the whole thing.
Yeah. Grants are, I would imagine that's one of the great side benefits of the grant. It's almost not so much about the money, because sometimes the money isn't going to move the dial too much on, whether you pay your grocery bill that month. It's more like the affirmation, validation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit of both,
Yeah,
it's nice to have a little cash flow for your time that you spend writing when you're not actually making any money. And then there's this sort of feeling of like, oh, I'm authentic.
Yeah. Or at least going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too, in your so you sort of came to writing, were you engaged in creative pursuits and writing kind of before you started your secret writing project, or was that just
that secret novel? I'll tell you, when I was young, I loved 2 things. Well, 3 things. I loved animals, I loved reading books, and I loved riding my bicycle around in the Humber River trails where I lived.
Awesome.
And those are still like 3 things that I adore. But because I loved animals so much, I was very sure that I should become a veterinarian. That seemed like the obvious way to go. And so in high school, I really enjoyed all my English classes. I really enjoyed creative writing, but I ended up, focused on science. I went to university. I started studying zoology. I went to vet school. I became a vet. And so the writing actually started when I went on maternity leave. I was my first daughter. So I was in my 30s, my early 30s. And one of the things that I did was I started writing these nonfiction pieces, and they were all sort of animal rights based. And I really got into this creative project. So that was the very first creative project that I'd done as an adult, for sure. And I wrote, I'm going to say maybe 10 essays or so. And, at the time, I thought they were amazing. Wow, these are so good. They weren't that great. They were a bit didactic. They were for sure like overwritten and over emotional. But that was sort of my doorway into writing. And then, time passed. I was raising my kids. I was busy with that. But then the next step was the novel. And then from there, off I went.
Awesome.
Great. And meanwhile, you're a practicing veterinarian, right?
Yes. So I have a funny history with that. So I practiced for several years. Then I had my children, and I was like a stay-at-home mom for a couple of years. And then I still wanted to be kind of the stay-at-home mom, but the kids were in school. So I started working part-time, and I started working part-time in education, because with my kids in school, I'd kind of gotten really curious and really engaged with how education worked, and what my kids were learning, and what sort of interested them, and how you could teach them. I did 1 year I was kind of homeschooling Chloe, my oldest daughter, and I was just really into it. And so I started working with this organization called Scientists in School, and they are a nonprofit, and their goal is to get science in the classroom hands-on. And so I started working with them doing mostly biology related workshops. For example, we do one that's all about owls, and the kids get to dissect owl pellets, find all the little bones. I'm sure your guest, what was her name? Hugo, Kristen.
Oh, Kristen Hugo. Yeah.
The finder of bones. I'm sure she would enjoy, and I'm sure she has, found bones in the owl pellets. But those kind of activities with kids that are hands-on, really engaging. The kids get really excited, and for me, it was really a nice job to do. It fit very well with, having kids in school and being able to work the school hours that they worked. And it wasn't stressful, which was also really good for me, because vet medicine was challenging for me in that sense. It was a hard career for me.
Right. I can imagine, emotionally, was it emotionally difficult?
Yeah, for sure. There's there's all the decision making, there's life and death decision making, there's the fear of making mistakes. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. There's all the euthanasias that you have to do. And, when you work in practice, it's a business, and if people come in and they don't have money for care, they don't have money for treatment, there's not a lot of other options, and so there's a lot of euthanasias that the decision is based on finances, and that's really hard, and also really hard to treat an animal with limited finances. They don't quite teach you that in vet school. It's like, well, these are the things that you do if the animal is sick with this, but then the people are like, well, I've got $200, and you're like, what are you going to do? So that was hard for me as well. The aspect of working for a business, and then there was a bit of, I'd call it like ethical fatigue, I think, more than compassion fatigue. It was like I had this vision of who I wanted to be and how I wanted to heal animals and what I wanted to do. And then not being able to do that was an internal struggle for me, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, there's this whole, empathic overwhelm, right? Where feeling so connected to the animals generally, and then specifically the ones that are coming into your clinic. And you've got these issues of economic euthanasia, and you can only do so much, and you probably want to bring every one of them home.
Exactly.
And it's interesting that you had, but at the same time, this creative impulse started to take over in a sense. And was there a tension between the two, or were you just like, no, I am happy to wash my hands of this and go in this other direction, because it sustains both instincts, it feels like.
Yeah. It was interesting because when I stepped away the first time, it was because of my kids, like, becoming a mother. And that was really significant for me. And I really loved being a stay-at-home mom. I know many people find it very isolating or very, challenging. For me, it was just a great time. I just loved taking the kids out, playing in the mud, going to the beach, reading books, like you said, Pat, the Pippi Longstocking stories, all the books that I read to them, all these activities that I did with them. So I really loved that. But around the same time where I was like, refocusing, one of the things I decided to do was go back to veterinary medicine. I wanted to give it another go. And so I started working part-time at the Toronto Humane Society. And the thing that I loved so much there was that it wasn't a business. So it's a nonprofit. And there's like such wonderful and dedicated people there. But one of the challenges was that I had stepped away. So I was a little behind in terms of skills and, remembering all the things that I needed to remember and all the new things that had happened during the time I was away, like with pharmaceuticals, for example. And I just ended up trying to write and trying to be a vet at the same time. And every time I thought, I should do some continuing education. I should, brush up on my this or that, take a course. I always ended up choosing to do like some professional development around writing instead. And I could just see that, I think I was trying to do something that I thought I should do, or I thought I was supposed to be, but I ended up wanting to do the other. And the real big thing for me that helped me with that decision was that I realized I was writing so much about animals and animal issues and our contradictory treatment of animals, and our celebration of animals, and also our bearing witness to what we do to animals. And I was like, I'm helping animals with my writing now. This is how I am working with animals. And that really helped me refocus and sort of turn towards being a writer more than anything else.
I love that.
Yeah, I think that it's, this tension, the thing that you love, right? Which is animals, but it's more than that. It's a caring and a compassion and an activity
Mhm.
and those kinds of things. And you start
Mhm.
down the one path, but it's not working. And
Yeah.
you manage to find this intersection
Yeah.
where your creativity can serve, sort of your mission.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I
That's so
was,
great.
uh, uh, with this Dream Path course, one of the things that we did was we identified what we valued. And it came back again and again to really valuing creativity. And once I acknowledged that and I looked at it in my life and I looked at it in the lives of other creatives, I just found how important it was, like how
Mm.
essential it is to being human, our storytelling and our creating.
Yeah.
Right, right. And I wonder, so for somebody who's listening, and I know, in our creative lives, we reach those points where it doesn't feel like it's working. It doesn't feel like we're getting from it what we were or want to get from it. And there's a period of trying to refocus and refine ourselves. And so would you advocate that somebody go through that kind of process and just asking yourself what's important?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think sort of, how we live our days is how we live our lives, right?
Mm.
And if we're not living in accord with what we value and whatever that value is, like I also value playfulness a huge amount. I'm one of those adults who I still play with my daughters.
Cool.
With my youngest daughter, we often go like off into the woods and do like just, silly stuff. We climb trees together, whatever. Take stepping stones across the river. And so, yeah, I just think if you're aligned with what you value, but you really have to identify what it is that you value first.
Yeah.
Some people might value responsibility much more than, I would choose it as a sort of value. But yeah, finding out what you value and then trying to live by those values. And you can just check in with yourself like today, what am I doing today that aligns with what I value and what I want to do and who I want to be.
Mhm.
That's great advice, actually. Yeah. Yeah, the farther out of sync you get with what really matters to you, even if you
Yeah.
haven't articulated it to yourself, but it's easier for that to happen if you haven't articulated it. The worse for me anyway, the worse I feel. It's like
Yeah.
there's something subtly wrong with everything, and
Mm.
but you do one thing that you really love doing. I mean, when you said you still love doing those things, riding your bike, reading, and animals, I was just like, man, there's gotta be a signpost from 12-year-old you or 10-year-old you or whatever. Um, in George's case, she's in second grade, I think 7, when the events in Tizzy and Me,
Yeah.
50 Ways to Love a Mink unfold. There's something about what you love when you're a kid at whatever age, you wanna pick, that the closer you can get to that
Yeah.
for the rest of your adult life, that's like the groove you're meant to be mining or
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, that's so great.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's a great connection, and
Yeah.
I wonder if, part of that exercise could be revisiting the 12-year-old self in a sense and looking for those points, like, what are the things that I'm still doing that I've always, I loved when I was 12 and I love now,
Yeah,
and,
Yeah.
trying to mind that for, creative direction, but just ideation, what's the next thing, where
Mhm.
do I go from
Yeah.
here?
Yeah. I think it's a great exercise for sure.
shoot, now we have a new project.
Yeah.
Oh my
I
god,
know.
if we get any more, okay. Speaking of projects, Nadja, you mentioned grants.
Yeah.
We've been doing this grant experiment over here at
Yes.
Underachievers. It's been kicking our butts for a while now. We're starting to get a handle a little bit more on the how not to be a dick when you're applying for grants because I had a terrible attitude. I just felt like, I mean, these things are hard to write. They're a pain in the ass. Why can't it be easier?
Yeah.
I'm very resistant to instruction. That's why I'm self-employed. But also, I just found it hard to I guess I felt like there was some kind of power behind there was a Wizard of Oz operating all the pulleys and strings, and I'm really getting the new information that that's not how it works. The more I talk to people who've been successful in getting grants, the more I understand that you've got to give the juries or whoever something to work with, and
Yeah,
you've got to give the admin body who takes them in correct grant applications so they can push them on to the next level
yeah.
without just so you sent me a really interesting email um for this one grant that this is how you and I met. I emailed you out of the blue. You were very
Yes.
kind to respond, and you gave me a little history. Do you mind if I read that
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
out? Okay, so this particular grant was the Marion Heb research grant. In 2019, you applied for the top amount, I think 7,500. Like there's two levels,
Yeah.
uh, and you were denied because of lack of funds. So
Yeah. So that was
in
interesting. So
yeah,
that means that the jury said yes, but they didn't have enough money to fund all of the projects that the jury said yes to.
what a
Wow.
burn!
Yeah. But for me, it was encouraging. I was like, oh, well, the project was good. So
Yeah,
that means that gave me like the momentum to go forward again and to try again.
yeah, and you did in 2020.
Yeah.
7,500 requested again,
Decline.
declined.
Yeah, so there you go. So really great to realize every jury is different.
Yeah,
And so you don't know who's on this jury that is going to be judging your work. And so it's definitely worthwhile reapplying with the same project. And I can
is
say
it
that from multiple times. Like I applied once with the Toronto Arts Council and I got a no. And then I applied with the same project and I got a yes. So
interesting?
Wow.
yeah. And
Yeah,
sorry, I'll let you finish there, Pat. You were
no, that's
No,
good
I
information. Yeah,
yeah, I think, so one, this narrative that Pat's working through is the same project, right?
yeah.
And it wouldn't ever have occurred to me to take a project back that got rejected and sort of figure it out and reapply, or even just as is reapply because you're going to be dealing with a completely different crew of people.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry,
Well,
Pat.
no,
Yeah.
no, this is and so the first one, it wasn't rejected. It was approved, but there weren't enough funds to go around.
Yes.
Second time, it was declined slash
Yes.
rejected. Then there was a third time, same project. This was 2023. So COVID happened. You applied in 2020. That year has 6 numerals for me for some reason.
It was so long.
It lasted forever. Then back on the horse, 2023. This time you cut down the amount of money you needed. Was that because you needed less or you figured you had a better chance?
No, they changed the program because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so they split it. As far as I remember, it was 300, like with like you weren't leaving your home to do research.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, 3,000. Did I say that? I thought I said
Yeah.
300.
3,000.
3,000. And then I think the larger amount or the second level was if you were traveling or something. There was something about how they changed it. So I just fit with the staying at home funding. So that was the
Yeah.
1,000 that I applied for at that time.
I think it might be the same now, actually, but I didn't read. I just thought I'm not going to start at 7,500 because they had a lower option and I knew I wasn't traveling. I think it is related to whether you have to travel, actually. So 2023, you applied for the you don't need to travel amount,
Mhm.
awarded partial grant of
Yes,
$1,440. So that's weirdly specific.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that obviously has to do with the powers that be and the finances behind it all. But for me, it was, oh, I got a yes. So it wasn't a lot of money at the end of all of this.
Yeah.
And that grant is a hard one to fill out. I mean, Pat, you were talking about that your inquiry question, and I had the same struggle with that. I was like, what is an inquiry question? And one of the things that I did that was helpful was I had a writing group. We met once a month and I brought my answer to my inquiry
Yeah.
question to my group to help me out with it. So that was really helpful too.
Yeah. That's
Oh,
great.
wow.
And you were funded. Was that the funding amount, was it even a line item on your budget? Like, was there something on your budget that they said, yeah, we'll fund this, but none of the other stuff? Or was it just
No.
that amount?
Because the funding, like the budget was basically just like money for living for,
Yeah, subsistence.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well
But
that's
I've had really good success with grants. I've been applying to them for a long time now. I think the first time was I'm going to say must have been 2016, 2017.
yeah.
Um, and, once I got the novel published, it was easier to apply for other grants because you need to, have certain levels of publication history.
Yeah.
But as you said, Pat, they are a lot of work,
Yeah.
but I've gotten better at them. So the more I do them, I feel like the better the chances are that I will receive them. One of the things that I think is really important is to really I don't know, to really be honest about who you are and what you're passionate about and what things are important for you to write about and why you write about those things. And then the other thing that I think is really important is to remember that it's a jury of your peers, right? So if you write something like, "Oh, I'd like to, revise and edit my novel," well, of course that's what you want to do. Like that's so obvious. So you've got to go a little bit deeper than that. You've got to talk about what things it is that, whatever stage of writing you're at. Like if you're doing revisions, like maybe I want to work on my, this one character who, has a bit of a flat line in terms of their character development, and you've identified that and you want to work on that. So I think that's an important part of it as well. And I would say persistence, like just keep trying. Just keep trying. I mean, I've had one of the granting programs that we have in Ontario. I don't know if this is the case in other provinces. The Ontario Arts Council has something called the Recommender Grant. It's a small amount of money. It's usually like $1,500 or $2,000 that you get, but you can apply 10 times and it goes to publishers, not to the juries.
Oh,
And so the publishers make a decision on whether or not you get the grant.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So because you can fill out 10 a year, that really increases your chances that you'll get one. And you make a connection with the publisher as well. Like for example, I got a a recommenders grant from Book Hug Press. And so I chose them to send my short story collection to them because I was like, wow, they liked my work and, they offered me this recommender grant. So I got a no eventually, but they initially were like, yeah, we'll read this and that's great. And thanks.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's a foot in the door,
Yeah.
it's like if you're the vacuum salesman going from door to door with your Hoover, having somebody even just even just they open the door and say, "Oh yeah, we saw your stuff," or they know that they recommended you. That takes away such a barrier that's already there with approaching publishers right now, which is that for the big five, the multinational presses, you need an agent for all of their imprints pretty much. And for the rest, you're just some schmo, and they don't even know how, if your book's good, because it doesn't get that far unless your query's really good. And, all these other things that aren't your book have to align
Right.
before you get your
Right.
book read. So that's a really smart grant. I'm going to see if they have
Yeah.
a BC equivalent.
Well, and I like what you're saying too, is don't generalize, right? Like give them something really solid to hang their hat on, that this person is going to use this money because there's a problem in their third act with this secondary character that's important for establishing the context of da 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 da, right?
Yeah.
And so then they know, oh, okay, this person is actually, and I would think for fellowships and those kinds of things, residencies, that's even more important because oh, if we're going to give this person a space, we know what they're going to be doing, right?
Yeah.
And we know how they're
Yeah.
going to use this as opposed to general.
And I can only imagine being on those juries, reading application after application. Like, of course, you want to be excited and curious about the project, right? So the better the project is described and the more detail that's brought to it and the more personal it seems, like, oh, this person's very passionate about this, and they're so interesting that they know about whatever niche little thing that they know about. So I always think that way too. I've never been on one of those juries, so that'd be interesting to talk to somebody who had. I'd be curious to get their sort of take on it.
Well, that's true, and it sort of increases your chance because you don't know the particular interests and idiosyncrasies of that jury pool that you're coming into. And so if you're really specific, you might actually hit sort of their little zeitgeist and, kind of luck out. And there was something Richard Kelly Kemick, who we interviewed a couple of weeks ago, he said, have an idea, not an emotion. And I think that speaks to that, which is the idea that I need the money for is here. And let me be very specific about how I enunciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that was very interesting with the Access, what's the full thing?
Access Copyright.
Yes, Access Copyright Foundation.
Yeah.
For that particular grant, I was able to speak to somebody who told me a little bit about what the jury said. And I've never encountered that with Toronto, with Ontario, or with the Canada councils. They're all like, oh, you get this no, and, they can't really tell you why or, where you went wrong. But I did get feedback, which was very helpful for my next application. So when I got the no, I called and talked to, I don't know what the title of the person was, a program coordinator or whatever. And they were able to share a little bit. So that was very cool.
That's amazing.
That's really cool.
Can you tell us what, you don't have to tell us exactly what the feedback was, but what was it about? Was it about how you described your project, or?
Oh, yeah. So there were a few comments from the jury, and the one that I remember the most was, so it was for a project. It's a historical novel that has been a sort of a project that I've been trying to do for several years now. I've done a lot of research. It's a historical fiction novel, and it's based on two women in the early 1900s in London, England, who were animal advocates and social justice advocates. And they, this is sort of a long backstory, but they were looking at how animals were being treated and used in universities as teaching tools. And so they became anti-vivisectionists, and they actually published this diary of their discoveries. And then there was a huge scandal in London at the time, and people were very divided between being pro-vivisectionists, like the medical community, and being anti-vivisectionists, which was, people being concerned about the animal welfare and the connections between how women were treated and animals were being treated. And so when I went to vet school, one of the things that happened to me was I became aware of vivisection in a very sort of hands-on kind of way. Animals are used as teaching tools. Animals are used to teach students how to do surgery. Animals are used for demonstrations and euthanized at the end. I mean, this was 30 years ago, and I'm sure things have changed somewhat since then. But it was a really eye-opening time for me. It was also a very difficult time for me being involved in that community of the sort of university attitude. So anyways, I wanted to write this novel, this historical fiction novel based on these two gals and the scandal that happened. There was a riot, there was protests. It was really an incredible story. So I've done a lot of research for it. I did get a grant for researching it. And so I've been working on it for a long, long time. One of the comments from the jury was that I was I didn't say too passionate. I had an agenda. That was it. I had an agenda. And I was like, oh, yeah, I do actually, but but I'm going to rejig the way I'm thinking about this. And so the next application I put, I explained that I was exploring like both sides of it, and I was going to write one of the characters who was a medical student who led the protest. I was going to write his point of view. And I thought it actually makes for a much better story, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Rather than we know this character is, opposed to this and this is her journey. Instead, we're getting these conflicting viewpoints.
Yeah.
And so it was a helpful comment for sure. At first I was a little taken aback. I was like, yeah, it's I do have an agenda and I'm passionate about animal rights. But then I realized, of course, that comes across kind of heavy-handed, right? So
that's amazing. I love that. That's kind of what I found about the research grant app was it made my novel stronger because I had to think differently. And that was without any feedback. That was just with doing the damn fiery question.
Yeah.
But getting that little tidbit of feedback from a jury, sort of like forwarded through the administrator or the program coordinator is like a little nugget of gold got sent to you in the mail, because you can't, you can spend it on anything you want to. And it would be very tempting to go, well, they're idiots, but it's a pro who looks at that and goes, "Good point,"
Yeah.
and, I really think that's great, and I just wanna tell you, I have a total, obsession with late Victorian, stuff, and
Oh,
just,
okay.
you know, just I hadn't thought of the anti-vivisection aspect of it. There was a lot of social justice work being done in that era by women, and it's
Yeah.
just so, could you just clarify for me, is vivisection so I know dissection, the thing the creature is dead. Is vivisection when the creature is still living?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
So one of the things that happened was these two gals were at in a classroom that was a demonstration, and the animal wasn't under anesthetic properly, and there were some rules that had been put in place with the Welfare Act that restricted how many times you could experiment on an animal, and this animal had been used in a previous experiment, and that was
Jesus.
against the rules. So that was kind of the scenario for that. But it was really interesting because there was actually a hospital in London at the time called the anti-vivisection, and it had doctors who were against vivisection working at this particular hospital. So it was a really interesting time for sure.
Oh, people
Huh.
were, so hungry for knowledge that I don't think they had their heads on right in some aspects. I mean, really, just what you described happening to the animal and already having been sort of used as a demonstrator, that's torture, that would be
Mm,
considered torture in
mhm,
anybody's
mhm.
views.
Yeah,
Now
cruelty, to be
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And
for sure.
it's interesting that so knowing this, right? The comment that comes back is there's too much editorialization in your fictional representation, right? Because it's showing that you have this agenda. And in the end, it actually ends up making what you're working on a better piece of writing.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
Yeah, I'll have to tell you, I'm just going to be straight up honest. I have never written historical fiction before. And so when I started this project, very excited. The research I love, like I'm so engaged in the research and reading it. I'm having trouble writing it because like when I write novels, I just write them. I'm not
Mm,
I don't plot things. I'm just, fly by the seat of
yeah,
my pants kind of writer. And
yeah.
I love that. I love like all of a sudden, something happens and I'm like, oh, where did I even get that idea from? What's going on here? There's all the surprises for me when I write. So I'm struggling because this story is already written. So I think there's
Right.
some kind of block that I've got to get around with this getting going with writing this.
Just a suggestion, the 3-day novel might be just your
yeah,
cup of tea, you know enough
Maybe, yeah, maybe that'll be the way I go.
to get
Okay,
started.
we'll
Yeah.
see.
yeah. Well, I've always found, so one of the things that I think a lot of people, who are curious, just people, right? We love to do research.
Mhm.
And
Oh, yeah.
so you get into something where you're sort of self-directed. Nobody's telling you to do it and putting guardrails on it and all that kind of stuff. And so you can do this deep dive into just the research and find like so much stuff and go down all these little rabbit holes. And then you sit
Yep,
down to write. And especially when the story is kind of already there, it's outlines, and you get this overwhelm. So it's
yep.
like I don't really know what to write right now because I've got this pile of research and I want it all to just flow naturally into this thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It,
historical
it's
fiction.
it's tough.
Nadja, I just wanna also suggest you probably you might already know there's a historical novel society. It's based in the UK, and they have, I think, a North American branch and maybe one down under.
the one that I was connected with had some issue with Canada, and you couldn't participate in any of their paid programs. It was something to do with GST. It was some craziness. I don't know if that's the
Wow.
same
Out
society or not.
loud. I hope that was a blip because, I was just gonna say they have an outstanding new novel award, um, that goes to an unpublished manuscript. I don't know what the deadlines are anymore. They used to have that award, and but what it can do is, A, give you a deadline, and also they have a jury, and then whoever wins, or even get shortlisted. Getting shortlisted is great, but if you win, you get your stuff looked at by a Bloomsbury editor with the UK.
Wow.
And so depending on who you're like, what publisher you think would want your book, because there are publishers who kind of have that vibe and that's their imprint, or um, that's their readership. It just sounds like such an exciting story and something that would really could be used out in the world right now, because it's kind of like things come full circle, and then there's
Yeah.
yet again advocating and
Yeah, and to me, anything that teaches empathy and compassion, right?
Yeah.
And
or even explores it. I don't know if you can teach that stuff. I mean,
well,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Really?
mean,
Yeah.
by showing and
Yeah.
engaging it, it's thinking about your children's book, Tizzy and Me, 15 Ways to Love a Mink, right?
Yeah.
So when you were talking about it earlier, I was thinking about what were the books that I liked when I was a kid, and one was what's the little engine that could, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then the other was The Red Balloon. And so it's like, no wonder I'm a liberal. Is you get shown empathy and these kind of skills, and I guess to sort of bring it back to the writing and creating, is we get to be part of that,
Yeah.
helping people find and see that, which is kind of cool. So
That's actually a really great point. I think I hadn't realized that it could. I think it could happen with a novel for adults, but yeah, it really happens, or it can really happen in picture books and children's chapter books, where I'm looking over at your book. It's because it's so cool. Oh, can we talk about the illustrations?
Yes.
Okay, so
So,
we're back on Tizzy and Me, 15 Ways to Love a Mink. And yeah,
so when you
illustrations.
submit, whether it's a picture book or a chapter book, you don't submit illustrations and you don't find an illustrator. That's what the publisher does, unless you are an author illustrator, which is the case with quite a few picture books. So after I submitted it, my publisher said, okay, we need to find an illustrator, and she suggested one person. So first of all, when you sign the contract, it's clear that they make the decision, but that you're included in the process.
Right.
So it's a bit scary, because what if you don't like who they finally decide to choose? But Bev Brenna was very, very generous, and she suggested, I think, 3 people that I said no to. One of them, the illustrations were more like cartoony, and I was like, no, that's not the right vibe.
Yeah.
But then she suggested Alice Priestley, and she sent me a link to some of her illustrations. And as soon as I saw them, I was like, oh, this is perfect. She'd illustrated a children's picture book, which was Mum and Mummy Get Married, or Mum and Mum. Anyways, it's 2 mums getting married. And the illustrations were just lovely. And the fact that there's 2 mums in this story as well, I was like, oh, this is the perfect illustrator. So from there on, then I didn't really interact with the illustrator at all. The illustrator gets the manuscript.
Really?
I don't tell them what I'm thinking people look like or what picture she should do. There's none of that. It's siloed. So she does the cover, did all the illustrations, and I just loved them all. They were amazing.
Oh, the hair's rising on my arms, because when you say that, it's like there are clues in the text about what Mom J and
Mama B,
oh God, what they look like, but they are so subtle, and you could imagine anything. And I imagined what I saw. I imagined what the illustrator Alice Priestley did.
And I got to meet Alice at the book launch, and we talked a little bit about the illustrations, and she talked to the audience a little bit about the illustrations, and it was so clear that she'd done such a careful read of the story. So there's a character, Aunt Bonnie, who is George's aunt, and she comes to the rescue, with her knitting. But the way that it's illustrated, Aunt Bonnie's like this superhero, and it's so cool.
Yeah.
I wish we had the audience to see the picture. You'll have to
me
book
too.
to see the picture.
Well, we can put little photos up with
Oh yeah,
the
that's a great
show
idea.
notes.
Oh,
Yeah.
we should. I mean, I don't know if there's copyright restrictions, but I think it's just so cool. If we're doing it in context, it's probably fine. Nobody will ever see it, although we do have listeners in 50 countries.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
just a
It's pretty
How long have
amazing.
you been doing this podcast for?
We started, our first episode was in July last year.
Yeah, end of last July.
Oh, okay. So you're not even a year in yet. Okay.
No, that explains a lot, right?
Yeah.
No. It's just I'm just amazed at the level of engagement and time that you must need to interview authors, find out about them. So it seems like a real passion project, and it's really amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, it is. But, anyway, so the illustrations, there are just also almost different styles. Like
Mhm.
this is the beach walk. It's where the big
Yeah.
talk happened. And um it gives me such goosebumps to think that all of these came from your text, and they are so apt, and
Yeah.
they're in the right place. You never see one before you need to, and you never you know you never get it so late that it's irrelevant. You get it at exactly the right time. So that's sort of a
Yeah.
layout masterfulness too that I really admire.
Yeah. I felt there was such good synergy between the illustrations and the
Yeah.
text. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect word for it. Really good.
Did you miss, I mean, it's collaborative, but it's not the kind of collaboration that I would imagine,
Mhm.
where you're really directly working with each other and generating ideas. And did you miss being able to do that, or was it such a nice surprise to get these lovely images?
I got they sent me quite early on sort of a rough sketch of the cover, and it was great. And and then I was just like, I'm just going to trust the process. Like, I loved her drawings. I'm not an artist,
Yeah.
that's not my skill. And so I'm just going to back off. This is her skill, and I trusted Bev so much, and I had seen Alice's work, and I was just like, yeah, okay, let's see what happens. Like, I was just like really open.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
For those listening, you can't see Nadja's face, but she's got a huge grin on her face, and you just strike me as such a positive person that, it's like anything that could be fraught, especially if you're sort of closed up about your creative stuff and you want full control. It's not that fraught for you. Definitely you have thoughts about stuff, but it's more like you just choose to look at what could go right, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think I just I trust from my experience that people who are in this industry, in the writing industry, in the publishing industry, agents, authors, illustrators, I think everyone has a really good heart and is really into creativity. And so, I kind of just want to stay in that space where I trust it. I might get burned, but whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of trust, we do want to also touch on the blurbing.
Yeah.
Well, the
situation.
blurbing. Yeah. I mean, I listened to your little clip around blurbing, and I'm kind of intimidated. So in my author questionnaire, I had to identify like who would be the perfect blurber and yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah, and just for
intimidating.
context, this is the new book that's coming out, the collection of short stories. Does it have a title yet?
It's called The Life of a Creature.
Oh yeah, The Life of a Creature. Sorry, you already had that. Yeah. Great title. And so the publisher has tasked you with letting them know who could blurb, and that's
Well, I'm still waiting. So I've sent in a couple questions actually I had about it. So one of the things that I wasn't sure of is if the blurber has to be writing in the same genre. Like, could I get in touch with a nonfiction writer, for example? And the second thing I wasn't sure about is because it's a Canadian publisher and I'm a Canadian author, whether it should be a Canadian author who blurbs. Because I do have a couple of American authors as well. So those questions are still to be answered for me. But one of the things that's clear is that, you usually need a connection with the author if you're going to get a blurb, right?
Yeah.
But to go in blind is not that likely that you'll get, someone to say yes. Because, you were talking about, like what a time commitment it is, right?
Yeah, they have to read the
Yeah.
manuscript. It's dangerous to blurb without having read somebody's manuscript. I
Right,
don't know
and
if
that's a
people do
big
it.
investment of time.
Yeah, yeah, especially
Yeah.
if you're the 5th person that month who's asked. So yeah, let's chat about that. Do you have a strategy yet? Well, you're waiting for answers. Let's say they say it can be anybody from any country, and
Yeah.
it can be in any genre, any type of writing. I imagine they would like somebody whose name is better known than somebody who's
Mhm.
nobody's familiar with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah, I
And
mean, I would
so
think,
it's like
yeah.
I feel like, okay, if I'm at this level, well, I'm doing a visual, but if I'm at a level, I'm want to approach an author who's further ahead in career than I am, but not so high up that it's unattainable. And
Yeah.
so I don't really know how to evaluate that. So I gave a list of the people that I have connected with, people that different authors that I know that I have a relationship. Like I have their emails. Like there,
Yeah.
I'll start there. Like I have an email address to send rather than I'm on a website and it says get in touch with my, my agent or whatever.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess I'll have to keep you posted on how it goes.
I would love that. That would be great. We'll have you back on, if that's okay, just to talk about when your collection comes out and also,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm so curious, not just about that aspect, but even about, I guess, well, how do you know writers in other countries? I know it through work. The Writers Union of Canada, I suppose somebody could belong to the union and live outside of Canada if they were Canadian. I don't know if you have to be a resident.
Yeah, I'm going to say like some of the writers I know I've taken workshops with.
Mm,
Some of the writers I know, well, for example, the short story collection before it was published, I submitted it to a contest. It's called the Siskiyou Prize for New Environmental Literature, and
yeah,
it's put on by Ashland Creek Press,
yeah.
and I won the award. And so I
Oh,
was in touch
congratulations.
with Midge and John, who are the two people who run Ashland Creek Press. And so, I got to get into a relationship with them. I took a class that they offered through their publishing house. I asked if I could do a reading that they would support with money from the Writers Union of Canada, and they
Mm.
agreed. So that was really great. So, anyways, I know them, well enough to be in touch with them and ask, but I'm just not sure now if it is Canadian authors or American authors that I need. I'm sure there's writers who you should have on as guests who know these things more than I know
Well,
them.
I think it's interesting to see this in process, and I was just thinking too, you began your career in secret as
Yes,
the hidden author, and now you are out.
that's true. I'm out of the closet as a writer. I am a writer.
Yeah, what do you put on your tax return? As a writer or yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
I mean, I know I actually remember the very specific moment when I switched from being someone who was writing. I used to say I like writing, I enjoy writing, I'm doing writing, I'm writing a novel, but I never said I'm a writer. And
Yeah.
then I took this one workshop, and it was just a really fantastic workshop. It was with Wei-Sim Choi, who's a Canadian author.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was there for a week intensive, and he said to me, "You are a writer," and it kind of was like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay, okay. And I embraced it from then on.
And so you do, it seems like you appreciate the value of mentorship. Would that be
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And like with Tizzy and Me, if you look on the front cover, there's a blurb there. It's from Robin Stevenson, and I was in touch with her because she mentored me, and she
Yeah.
actually just wrote down a comment as we were emailing back and forth. She was like, "Okay, things are really great," and she gave this comment, and I was like, "Oh, Robin, can I use this as the blurb?" And so it came about quite naturally. So that was
You
really
made
great.
it so easy for her, right? There's nothing easier than being asked, "Can I use this thing you already wrote?" Rather
Yes,
than,
and you've
"Oh."
already read the whole manuscript several times. Yeah, perfect blurber.
Yeah. That's
so
so
it
great.
seems like your career has really developed in a very sort of organic kind of way, but there's also a certain intentionality behind it. I mean, you went
Yeah,
to, you were seeking something, and you've
yeah,
obviously found it, beyond just the skills that you have as a writer, what are some of the things that have really helped move your career forward that you've been able to do?
I think, there was this intentionality there, but it was intentionality in like lots of different ways. So, one thing that I wanted to do was become a better writer. And so I took workshops and courses and classes, and I still do. I'm one of those lifelong learners. I'm like so excited to get a new notebook and, join some workshop and have some fun. So there was that. And then, in putting the time, right? We can have great intentions around doing our writing, but you actually have to write to do it. So
Yeah.
there was, the time commitment of it. And then, for me, it was this determination, I think that really was helpful, like not being sort of discouraged by how hard it is to do a grant application, not being discouraged by getting another rejection. I have one short story. I'm going to say maybe I've sent it out like 40 places. I'd have to look back, but it's still a no. I never
Yeah.
guess on this one.
Yeah.
But it's going to be in the short story collection. So there we go.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
I had one short story I accidentally published twice, but it was like 20 years apart or something. Because I was digging through it, I was like, oh, nobody ever accepted this and sent it out. And then I realized, oh, maybe it had,
That's funny.
kind of get lost a little bit.
I think fair use is 70 years. It has to be more than 70 years old. So you probably have a lawsuit on your hands.
Yeah, I imagine I have several, probably. And it's center what you just said is, you've got to find the time and capacity, which, hits on another experiment we have coming up, which is about creative capacity. And
Yeah.
so, we have a way that we're kind of thinking about it and describing it. And I'm wondering just saying, what would be your creative capacity? How would you describe that term?
Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by capacity. Like,
finding the time to write, finding the capacity to develop ideas, finding the capacity to do the continued education and
yeah.
those things, because we could spend, all of our time doing the stuff around writing and never do the writing, or we could spend all of our time doing the writing and then there's life, right?
Yeah. There's that too, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a great thing to think about. One of the things for me is just really being aware of how much I enjoy writing. Like it really is one of my sort of flow activities. So when I write and I'm really in the moment, it's just a really wonderful place to be. I kind of lose track of time. I kind of lose track of myself and my awareness of myself, and I'm really in the story. And so I really love that. I love that space. So being creative, like I don't really struggle with writer's block too much because I don't ever sit down at the computer to write unless I've already got some ideas that are percolating. And a lot of times, I'm out in the woods and I'm thinking about like what's going to happen next with Tizzy and me. And I'll get an idea. Oh, this will be really great to write about, the dog destroying something, So off I go. And then when I get back, the ideas are there and I just start writing. So yeah. And the other thing that happens is sometimes I'm not feeling creative, but I want to engage in my writing every day. And so those are days where I'll be like, okay, I'm going to work on a grant application. I have like my long to-do list of like really practical things. Like, I need to take my author photos. I need to edit this short story. I want to submit this poem. I want to do this, that, and that. So on the days where, maybe I'm not creating, I will work on my like projects of things to do. And I'm very, very much a person who loves the little dopamine hit of getting something done, little like I check something off my list. I feel good. I'm like, oh, I got 3 things done today with my writing. Good for me. Even though if nothing comes of it, like, that's the funny thing, right? You have to put it out there and then you just have to see what comes your way.
Yeah. I mean, nothing tangible comes of it, but I would propose that every time you do even administrative tasks or like sort of project management tasks like you're talking about around writing, it raises the writing up in your consciousness because you're creating a container for it, really.
I
so
love that.
it can't float unless it's in a container. And all of that stuff, I used to think of it as just a hassle, but it's part of the job. Would you say you have
Yeah.
a bunch of systems? Do you keep a long list and then you check stuff off? Is there like is there areas do you do your website stuff? Do you do marketing or do you just kind of go wherever it's an emergency?
That's a good question. I mean, social media is not really my thing. I have an Instagram account. It's more, pictures of the woods and the animals that I find out there and stuff like that. And then a little bit of my writing stuff injected in there. I have my kids to help me with my website, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I have a notebook and it's divided into different sections. And one is like my submissions, like the projects that are ready to go out. I have like, I'm going to say 4 children's picture books that I've written them, I've edited them, they're in good shape. I'm trying to send them out and getting lots of rejections, but I'll go back to those things I want to submit, courses and classes I want to take. I usually try and take at least 1 or 2 courses a year, some kind of workshop or continuing education or course or something like that. Well, I'll tell you what I did yesterday. My writing time was spent looking up residencies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I started doing that because I listened to one of your guests, and I think you asked a question like, what's your dream thing?
Yeah.
And so that was in my mind, and I was like, oh, I'd like to go to Fogo Island for that residency there. And I looked it up, and I was like, oh, I'm not at that level.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, yeah,
No,
that's discouraging, right?
Yeah, the guests there are stunning, but a lot of them seem to be like curators of art. And anyways, but then I was like, well, there must be some other residency that I could do. So I spent an hour and I've got a little list now, and I'm going to research them a little bit more and maybe send in some applications. So that's where I was off to yesterday.
I love that. And actually, that seems like a good spot. Or we could cycle around to the question we like to ask, and sometimes we forget, is what is your delusional ambition?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 of them. One is writing a historical fiction novel, which sometimes does seem delusional to me, even though I'm well in the process. It still seems like, really? Like, you really think you can do that? So there's that. And then, yesterday I was thinking, oh, I want to go to Fogo Island. So I think, going on some residency where I don't have to pay, like being funded to go on some residency, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime where you feel like you're kind of punching upward, and have a little success, a little breakthrough feels pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think of my other delusional aspirations, but nothing's really coming to me.
Yeah. Well, I like how kind of your delusional ambitions are based on, well, they seem achievable, just to me from my perspective on you. They seem like there's something. I have every confidence that I'll see your historical novel come out, and I'll see you at that residency, or at one where you get fully funded or partially funded at least. So they seem achievable, and they also seem it within a time window that you can get your head around,
Yeah.
not like it's not like you're going to win the Booker Prize in 5 years. That was my delusional ambition for years. I didn't
Is it
actually
still
write
there? Is it still one of your
Yeah.
ambitions?
I I don't know if I could call it an ambition now. It's more like one of those. It's like the green light at the end of Gatsby's dock. It's just or Dave's dock. It's like one of those things that I laugh about because there's so many millions of steps between me now
Yeah.
be there, that it's kind of hilarious. It's like saying I want to be James Bond,
Yeah.
well, I better get in shape then. I better start exercising. Booker Prize, I better write a few pages. Yeah, anyway.
Well,
But
the
yours
other
seems
thing
good.
I would say, to your delusional is, for both of them, I see that you absolutely have something to offer.
Yeah.
And why somebody who's a decision maker for either, excuse me, would say, yes, this person has something to offer. There's something unique here. The other people or the readers or whoever it is are going to find something here of value and interest. So,
Thank you.
so part of that, I think part of that is like with the grants and things is being able to figure out, from the inside out, as opposed to, where we can see it, or, people external to it have perspective, is being able to understand, here's what I can do that's different or unique, or I have to offer this unique, and then being able to phrase it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think that's a great thing that all of us have, right? We all have the things that make our writing special, the things that make our writing unique, the things that we bring to our creative projects. And I think, just remembering to not undersell yourself and your ideas and your passions and your projects. Like, just really believe in what you're doing. And I think that comes through, like, for example, grant application. If you're doing it with like, I want this money and they should give it to me and I deserve it, it's not the right attitude to go in with, right? You want to go in with, I'm really passionate about this project. I really want other people to be passionate about this project. I think I'm capable of this project. That kind of attitude, I think, is a better way in.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's great. Very good.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's an education for sure. It is right. Weirdly, writing is not about the writer. And sometimes it's easy to forget that.
Yeah, I like thinking about that with books that are published and out in the world that I have no control over anymore.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, and people are taking those stories and, whatever their perspective on life is and how they read it, it's a different story for each person. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the beauty of it. I guess like any art, like I think if you look at any 100 people listening to a piece of music, or, watching a dance performance, or in an art gallery, it's the same thing. You bring yourself to everything you do. So it's always subjective. And that gives a lot of room for the creative part, which, I'd love to keep talking about it, but it's just so interesting that, you find being creative such a important aspect of your life, and that it took I get the sense that it took a while. It sure did for me to understand that it's not just important. It's almost like a way of operating that, you can't imagine living without it now.
I would kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier about values. Like, you've identified that you value creativity so much that it's, way up there with what you want to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Well, I think we've stolen enough of your time, probably.
Yeah, it's I think I need lunch.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nadja. I really appreciate you we both really appreciate you being on. It's been so interesting and I don't know, valuable.
Yeah. Well, and you've got a new listener for your podcast, so that's great too.
That's the most important part. Get those numbers up.
Well, I look forward to your next episodes for sure. Thank you so much for having me visit with you. It was amazing.
Thanks so much for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. Thank you to our special guest, gifted achiever Nadja Lubiw-Hazard. You can find Nadja's books linked below in the show notes. We'd love to hear what you think, so please feel free to drop on over to our Substack page and leave a comment under the episode. Until next time.